Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. This is the Acsom Bulletin, JP. I was looking this morning on the 31st of July, 2020, the first Acsom Bulletin live streamed from Dalkeith. And until recently, it had 141 views. I think it's gone up to about 239 now. But over the piece and over the period, they're building up the team and bringing in people to tell us all about their thoughts on everything Celtic. We've obviously built it up a wee bit bigger and hopefully better than those early days 3 years ago. So we're almost nearing our 3-year anniversary. It's been a wee while longer since you and I got together in that studio over in Stirling, wasn't it? That must have been
August 2018.
You've got a great memory. So we're coming up for 5 years. Tremendous. And we're still here and there is still loads to discuss, especially when I've not spoken to you in a few weeks as well. But I did tune in from afar, remotely, and I watched you on the show, so I've been keeping my ear to the ground. Loads to discuss. I'm going to ask you about the whole lot of it. Before we get started, tell me a wee bit about that jersey over your shoulder, JP.
It was a lockdown purchase. I went a wee bit daft on football strips in lockdown. Actually, before I started coming on here to talk to you, which was December 2020. But yeah, I found myself buying football strips, as you do, because there was nothing else to spend money on. So I was looking for bargains. But that was like a kind of reduced. I can't remember what site I got it on, but it's an FC Eibar, Basque team. So between Bilbao and San Sebastian, and it's got like the Basque colours detail on the trim there, and then it's got like the Basque flag on the nape of the neck. So I just liked it because it looked like Barcelona, but it wasn't Barcelona, and it was. I've not actually been to Eibar. I can't say I've been there. I've been to Bilbao and San Sebastian, which is right between, but I've not been there. When you buy a strip like that, you kind of like go, right, I'd quite like to go to a game there someday. They're just like they're a second division club, so I mean, I don't really know what their fan base is like or how big the ground is or anything like that. But I think it's a pretty cool top.
It is a good thing to do when you're trying. Obviously, if you had gone to a football game in every city that you travelled to, JP, that would have been a documentary in itself. But I do remember going to Real Mallorca, going to one of their games, and it was the coldest match I've ever been to. You know, up until that point, Stenhousemuir versus Alloa at Oakville View was the coldest game of football I'd ever watched or played in. And then it was that mantle was taken by Real Mallorca, which is quite an unusual thing. We are live. Please, if you like what we're doing, you want to comment, subscribe to the channel on the YouTube. And whilst you're in there, give us a wee thumbs up. We're going to be talking about everything that JP and I have missed together. That is, we're going to be talking about Jota, Kyogo, Moy, the new guys coming in. Who's buying the players? Do we need big name signings? How much money are we going to be spending? The Ibrox ticket fiasco rumbles on. We might even mention that Celtic jersey, and you might be surprised that JP and I don't agree on it either. We'll start off with Jota, though. Jota's gone. We've been talking about all the stats, the impact that he made. JP, it's an incredible deal for the player, an incredible deal indeed for Celtic. But looking back now, I guess we can look back and say, what was the most memorable moment for you? Which one do you hold most dear from Jota?
Quite a few, actually. It's quite hard to nail it down because I think I've been really conscious, possibly since we came back after COVID, just to sort of enjoy every moment. Mm-hmm. And you've said that many times on shows. Just you never know how things are going to change and all the rest of it. I mean, we would never have expected to be sitting in our houses watching football games in empty stadiums and watching Rangers run away with the league by 20 odd points or whatever it was. So things like that can happen. Obviously that was an anomaly, as it's been proven, but like with regards to Jota, I just was really conscious of the fact that he wasn't going to be here that long. I thought maybe getting him for a third season was a possibility given the Champions League thing, but when someone comes knocking on your door with that kind of money, regardless of the level of football, I think it's just been a sort of confluence of events that Nuno Espirito Santo, Portuguese manager, much like your man, is it Scott Munn or
that's right.
Nice. It's just like of course, there's going to be a coming together of people that know each other, and I don't know if there's a relationship between the manager out there and Jota that goes back or not. Regardless, it will just be it's his decision. Like another manager at that club might not sign Jota, but because he's got this access to this funds that he's got access to, and he knows Jota, he's probably just went, we'll get him. He'll do well in this league. He's better than this league. He's tore it up in Scotland. His stats are amazing. So that's my thoughts on him going there. With regards to the memories of Jota, I think, despite it being a consolation goal, his free kick in the Bernabeu was
good shout.
It was just to see a kid that had been in the periphery of a Benfica side score in that stadium, and I know people will take issue with him celebrating, or there'll be fans of other clubs will be like slagging him and things like that, but to try and put myself in his shoes for that moment, it must have been unbelievable. I've scored a raker at like sevens when we've been getting beat, and I've still celebrated it.
Exactly.
It's just something that you would never ever think that you're going to do. Like score an absolute worldly free kick in the Bernabeu that drew applause from the home support. Like it genuinely did. Like they applauded it, which. Again, there's that thing that people don't like us applauding good players at Celtic Park. It's like when we applauded Modric off the park and things like that. That was sort of frowned upon, and you're just like, I don't really see what's wrong with that, because the opposite happened to us with Jota in the Bernabeu, where Real Madrid fans were applauding one of our players for scoring against them. I'm not entirely sure I'd be all right with applauding a player scoring against us at Celtic Park when they're hammering us. But the applauding going off the park I think that's a different thing. But anyway, but that and the chip against Rangers was unbelievable, followed by the celebration. He knew what he was doing. He's written himself into Celtic folklore with the series of shots. The shot where he's celebrating like that at Hampden with the backdrop of absolutely fizzing Rangers fans. That was planned. He knew that there would be
not a mobile phone in sight, JP, surprisingly enough. To capture the moment.
Yeah, that and then the fist in the air in front of them at Celtic Park as well.
And the Dundee United celebration where he gets up on the billboard and he's right in amongst the Celtic fans.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? Last minute goal.
All those things. There's so many. And then obviously you've got the Brazen Head photo shoot as well with the Bumblebee strip.
Yeah.
He's left a mark, there's no doubt about that, and I think there's people still bumping their gums about him not having posted a farewell message or anything like that. I'm sure that'll come, but right now I'm sure his priority on social media is to promote the new club that he's joined, and he's getting paid whatever sort of money, 100 odd grand a week. I'm pretty sure that's at his top list of his priorities, and his agent and management and all that will be like, yeah, save the birthday card stuff for Celtic until after you've promoted this mental move that you've just made to Saudi Arabia.
It's interesting you mentioned the Real Madrid goal, because I was thinking about that. I don't think it's one of the obvious ones, JP, because of the circumstances in which it was scored. But I think back to that, the initial press conference that he did with fan media outlets, and he spoke about Ronaldo being his hero. Since then, there was the picture that emerged. I think, was he a mascot maybe for Portugal, and Ronaldo standing above him, and he's just a kid. Jota's just a kid with the Portugal strip on. I'll come back to that, because people have been sending me loads of Roy Aitken pictures with him as wee guys at Butlins and all that as well. Yeah, JP, I'm going to ask you about that. So when he's scoring that goal, again, I don't care for Ronaldo. I've got to say I'm not a massive fan of Ronaldo. I don't know if you are, JP. I'm just not a massive fan of him. But Jota was, and for him to score that goal at the theatre, probably where he played his best football, arguably, Ronaldo, I'm pretty sure that would have been at the forefront. But my favourite moment was also during that press conference when Declan McConville, our very own Declan McConville, asked Jota a question, and Jota asked him to repeat it because he was so Scottish that he didn't understand it the first time round. And that, for me, was a highlight And poor Declan managed to get his way through that question. Are we becoming comfortable? I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but there's a normalisation, isn't there, that we bring in a star player. He's brilliant for a couple of seasons. The star player goes somewhere else. Is that something that you're ever going to be comfortable with, JP?
I mean, kind of, yeah. I was spoiled in a way with Larsson and getting to see Larsson so much in that time, and 7 seasons of just absolute brilliance, and seeing him develop as a player to become the player. I mean, he left Celtic a world-class player. He didn't arrive a world-class player. He arrived a really, really good player, I'd say, but I don't know if you could say he was world-class when he arrived. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got him, I don't think. But again, you look at that Larsson move, that only came about because of Wim Jansen.
Yes.
So, like, we would not have got Larsson probably without the lure of Wim Jansen bringing him. So in the same way that Espirito Santo wouldn't have got Jota, maybe he wouldn't have gone to that club without him being there, and maybe he would have stayed on. But it's just a unique opportunity with a lot of money as a reward. But with the regards to people staying, I think, yeah, you just have to accept it. The careers are short, times have changed, there's money there to be made, and you look at when Frimpong left, I wasn't that bothered. I honestly didn't think Frimpong was that good. I think I said it at the time. I'm not changing my mind on that based on what's happened with his career since. But I've not seen him play enough for Leverkusen to say how much he's got better. But he must be doing really well to be getting linked with the sort of clubs that he's been linked with, and for the fee as well. So I kind of thought when he left, I went, oh well, he'll probably bounce around, maybe make his way into the Bayer Leverkusen team. I didn't think he would maybe even get a game. But it just shows you if you've got the right opportunities that you can go to the top in the game, and Celtic's a decent platform to get you there.
Without a doubt. I mean, the teams that are in for Frimpong, I did like Frimpong, JP. I just didn't rate him as a defender. I didn't think he was anywhere near good enough in a defensive sense, and he was obviously playing right back for us. I remember the League Cup game that you'll probably remember for Foster's brilliant performance or Julian's winning goal. Frimpong was the best player on the park, even though he got sent off. He was the outball for the entire game.
We were it was basically give the ball to Frimpong and hope he can do something. And then I'm pretty sure that happened in the game at Celtic Park as well. Like, just constantly giving the ball to Frimpong and expecting this wee guy, 19, to sort of rip it up. And I think that was maybe the game we lost to them. Remember? Did we not lose? 2-0
game.
No, was it
2-1? Christie missed a penalty, didn't he?
Yeah. I think that was that game. I might be wrong on that. I just remember there being a game at Celtic Park against Rangers where it was constantly just giving the ball to Frimpong and going, right, on you go. And you're like, it's a lot of pressure to put on somebody to deliver. I don't know how he's been played at Leverkusen, how he's been utilised there, but like I said, his numbers must be really great to be getting linked with Arsenal and Barcelona and Man United and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and again, we'll get a nice wee knock on if he is to go to one of these. It's interesting you're talking about there about how a manager comes to a club and they bring almost like a trusted ally with them. And you mentioned Wim Jansen and Henrik Larsson, and the fact that Jansen knew that we could get him for a steal, and it is still one of the best deals of all time. Martin O'Neill, of course, it was probably Neil Lennon. Bringing Neil Lennon from Leicester took a wee while for us to get him. Joe Venglos knew Lubomir Moravcik. We didn't. He did, thankfully, and he brought him. Brendan Rodgers first time in, Toure, and maybe Sinclair, I would say, and then Ronnie Deila, Johansson probably would be the Ronnie Deila one that springs to my mind. And I think we are going to be talking about the signing policy, the recruitment, and how that works, and also whether or not we're going to be seeing a couple of players come to the club that are obviously Brendan Rodgers signings, because you've also got the Ange Postecoglou factor, whereby Aaron Moy was clearly his boy. The Japanese players were clearly identified by him. Whereas even the player we are speaking about, JP, Jota, was he an Ange signing? Probably not. He was probably identified by the recruitment team.
I mean, I hope that was the case, because it shows that we're we're shopping in the right markets. I think it was interesting in what John Hughes said yesterday about these clubs, Saudi Arabian clubs, potentially shopping in our markets now, where they would be coming up against us for a player like Jota, and it might make it more difficult for us to get somebody, depending on how much they are actually going down the getting developing players rather than a player past his in his 30s like Benzema or whatever. But I'm encouraged by the fact that the Jota signing. If anybody ever thought that those days were gone where we would sell players for 25 million, and I know it's a kind of an anomaly because it's Saudi Arabia, but it's the same. It's the same money. it's we've sold a player for that amount of money. As much as people from elsewhere in Glasgow don't want to admit that, or they want you to be broken down, or it's not as much as Bassey, or I mean, we've got really good money for a player that we paid really good money for, and I mean, you look at the likes of Kent, who's 7 million spent on Kent, and they didn't get anything back for him. So we've spent 6 million and got the thick end of 25 back for Jota, and sold at the right time, not allowed them to become I can't think of the word. Not allowing to become unhappy, which is what can happen if someone stays too long and you're holding them to ransom. You don't want that to happen. So it's his time to go. He was obviously happy to go and play there, and we've got a good money for him, which we can hopefully reinvest in the squad, in the team, the first team.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the other thing I would say about Santo as well is the fact that he's got in himself the experience managing in Europe and in England specifically. So people talk about Jota, lack of ambition in a football sense because of where he's playing his football. But you know, you go over there, you make the millions. What's it, 10 million a year, something like that, and you just never know what's going to happen in the fullness of time. Will his gaffer end up back in English football? I know that Spurs fans probably wouldn't take him back, but he done well at Wolves, didn't he? So you know, he might end up back there. Jota might end up following him in the same kind of vein that we've just spoken about. A manager goes somewhere and there's one or two players that he likes to take with him. Let's see if that happens with Brendan Rodgers as well. But on the subject of Wolves, actually, nice link. South Korean leg of the tour. It was doomed to failure, wasn't it? I mean, Roma pull out, Wolves pull out. They're blaming the promoters. It's thankfully a different set of promoters for that leg of the tour as it was for the Japanese leg. Thankfully for guys like Liam Carrigan who are going to the games, they will still be able to enjoy Celtic when they go out there. So South Korea, we were talking yesterday, and it was just almost a flippant suggestion. JP says, why not, come home and go to Ireland instead and play a game there? And some of the comments came through rightly saying, yeah, but it's all about the standard of opposition. Because I was just thinking about it from the perspective of, fulfilling the need to go to Ireland, and we should be doing it more often. And we should be going to our fan base there rather than always the other way around. And then there was a rumour on Celtic Underground last night, I think, talking about the Wolves game getting rescheduled for Dublin. That would be a cracker, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. It'd be an expensive day out. I think it would be almost as expensive to have a day out in Dublin as it would have been to fly to South Korea. I've not been recently, but a few mates have, and they say that the drinks prices are absolutely eye-watering in Dublin. They've gone through the roof. I don't think there's such a thing as a happy hour or anything. It's just, I mean, if you want to get around the drinks, you're going to come back very skint from the bar. So I mean that would be amazing to have a Celtic game in Dublin. Have Celtic played in the Aviva or anything like that, or like at one of the big sort of stadiums? I can't think of a friendly in recent times that's happened.
Where did we play Barca? Remember we played Barca
in Dublin,
in Ireland. I'm sure we did.
All right, okay.
That. Someone in the comments, Jungle Lion, is already in the comments. Let us know, where did we play Barcelona? And we played Liverpool over there, didn't we? When Brendan Rodgers was the manager of Liverpool and Neil Lennon. Yeah.
It was a tournament. Aye, it was a tournament, wasn't it? Was it some sort of like 3 or 4 team tournament, I think?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the trophy was, but honestly, see when Lawrence came out with that bicycle patter on Tuesday, that was brilliant. It was completely unplanned. We're talking about Roy Aitken's managerial career at Aberdeen, the fact that he won the League Cup. against Dundee 2-0. And in the Dundee team, I remember Vikors was looking really, really good for Dundee at the time. And the man of the match won a Coca-Cola mountain bike. I think it might have been Stephen Glass or Paul Bernard. Was it Stephen Glass? And we're going, where is that bike now? And obviously Lawrence linked that into using it in your trophy cabinet. But on the subject of Roy Aitken, I've probably shared this story a number of times, but I don't know, were you a Butlins kid? Did you go to Butlins in there, JP? Did you do that?
No, we went to, my mum always took us to Scarborough. I went there 2 or 3 times, so I never ventured to Ayr. More's the pity, apparently it was, I was listening to you talking about it, it sounded like it was pretty good. And if Celtic players were there when I was a wee guy, I would have lost my mind, because, I don't know, I didn't. I mean, the one time I did meet Roy Aitken actually, and the Scotland team of '92. I was in Largs, so not far, I suppose, from here, and my dad and I went on like a boating course, and we were staying in the Largs Sports Centre, whatever it is, wherever people go and do their badges. And we went down for breakfast one morning, and it was just me, my dad, and the entire Scotland team in this canteen. So I was up with my tray next to like Gordon Strachan, Roy Aitken, Willie Miller, Paul McStay.
That's outstanding.
McCoist. I was for a week. Somewhere in a book, I've got a booklet for the boating course that me and my dad were on, and I've got it signed by about 7 or 8 Scottish international players. So, I mean, obviously, it was great getting to see like Paul McStay, Roy Aitken, because obviously I knew who they were Celtic-wise, because I was 12 at that point and fully immersed in obsession with Celtic. But to meet actual Celtic players in Celtic gear or whatever at Butlins would have been a big deal, I'm sure.
Oh, it was massive. It was
Why
massive.
were they there? Why?
Well, the reason I bring it up again is I mentioned it yesterday. I said, listen, were you like one of the mad kids like me who used to love going to Butlins and meeting guys like Roy Aitken? Bobby Lennox, I never seen Bobby Lennox, but apparently he used to do it. I posted a photo last night, actually, Bobby Lennox. And then you would have, apparently, Tommy Callaghan and Billy McNeil did it. Danny McGrain, they actually went to play tournaments. This is pre-season stuff, JP, right? So in the pre-season, they would go and meet fans, get the photos taken and all the rest of it, and it would be like a hired hand taking the pictures, and maybe 2 days later, they would appear somewhere on the Butlins site, and you would go and buy your picture, right? And Billy McNeil, Danny McGrain, as I say, but they actually played in like 5 or 7-a-side games where people are like kicking their shins and all that. This is pre-season. I mean, and I asked the viewers if you had shared that experience to send us some images. I've got loads on the social media. I've got loads on the email of Roy Aitken at Butlins. What a collection of retro Adidas tracksuit tops Roy Aitken used to have back in the 80s, by the way. But on one occasion, he turns up, just nonchalantly wearing the match-worn 1985 Scottish Cup final tracksuit, all embroidered and stuff. And he's just meeting all the Celtic fans. It's just changed days. It's absolutely changed days. So thanks, everybody, for sending your images.
When you said site, by the way, the Butlins site, you mean the actual physical site that you were on, not a website?
Exactly. Aye, the holiday site. I also met Glenn Michaels there one year. But he didn't bring Paladin, and he was so crabbit to all the kids. JP, these things stay with you. I used to watch the Cavalcade all the time, and I boycotted it after that. I seen that you got your James A. Forrest tickets, and I'll come back to Strachan actually later on in the show. Roy Aitken, 15 years as a first team player at Celtic, making his debut at 16. He only left in 1990. Actually, I read an interview recently. He was talking about the fact that there was an agenda against him by the media and also the officials. And he spoke out about it. And he left and he went to Newcastle, as we all know. But Roy Aitken is going to be joining a Celtic State of Mind live on stage at the end of this month. Tickets are going well. The VIP section is completely sold out. If you want to come along and recreate your Butlins photograph, then the ticket link is underneath this video. I can't wait for this one. He was a hero of mine in the centenary season. But we're talking about the kind of modern day. Jota comes in for a couple of years. We're now comfortable. That's what he's going to be here for. And then in the same breath, we talk about James Forrest and the loyalty that James Forrest has shown Celtic. It's been phenomenal. I'm sure there have been occasions in his career where he could have gone elsewhere. He didn't. He's still here. First and foremost, I just think that he's the type of player that deserves a full packed house at Celtic Park, JP, isn't he?
100%. Well, if you it's quite clever as well by the club that it's the only pre-season friendly at Celtic Park. There's not another one, so this is the first opportunity to see Celtic under Brendan Rodgers again. Opportunity to see new signings. I sound like I've been instructed by the club to sell this in some way. I haven't. I'm a Celtic fan. I've been a season ticket holder for pretty much the entire time that James Forrest has played for Celtic since, and before I renewed my season ticket in 2013. So 10 years I've watched James Forrest contribute to Celtic, and there's no way I would be anywhere else on that night than in that ground. I mean, fair enough if I had work or something like that, I'd obviously need to think again. But there's just no question I'll be there. I mean, if you think back to hearing Peter Grant talking about his testimonial, he didn't think there'd be anybody there. He was in the dressing room and somebody came in and said, "Oh, there's queues," or something like that. There's massive queues. Did they have to postpone the kickoff or something like that because loads of people had turned to pay up at the gate or something like that?
I remember I was at that game, Bayern Munich it was. And I remember leading up to that, having a similar conversation that we're having about Jamesy Forrest here with my cousin who I went to the game with in relation to the fact that Peter Grant wasn't a fan's favourite. You know, he divided opinion, JP. Was he underappreciated? That's probably another discussion.
I've got a mate in Australia, Chris, who no fan of Peter Grant. I think it was around about the time that you were doing the night with him at Gracie's, and he was just like, I could never stick him. And I'm like, what? Like, it's Peter Grant. Like, how?
I know. Yeah. But it was busy. It was. I'm not sure. I'd need to look at the attendance, but I think there was maybe 40,000 at that game. And my first Celtic game ever was a testimonial. It was Tommy Burns' testimonial, and I think all the players that we've seen having testimonials, they're becoming fewer and further between. The last one would have been Scott Brown. I think Scott Brown would have been the last one, and the one before that would have been Jackie McNamara. So we used to get them quite regularly. There was a whole spate of them in the 80s with Danny McGrain, Roy Aitken, Tommy Burns, and then you've got the likes of Pat Bonner. Davy Provan had one because he retired, then Pat Bonner, and we just don't see them as often now. And I think James Forrest is part of a dying breed. We're lucky to have also Callum McGregor, who eventually will have a testimonial. But on the flip side of the likes of Jota, you know, players will come and go, and it's been normalised. But Jamesy Forrest, he's been here his entire career. It doesn't look as though he's ever going to leave. I will also be there. I'll take the wee fella in that as well, because I think it's that type of game, isn't it? It's a nighttime game. You can give him the whole experience. What kind of role do you think Forrest is going to have this season under Rodgers?
I would be pleasantly surprised and happy if he had some sort of renaissance a la Scott Brown when Rodgers came in the first. I mean, obviously Brendan Rodgers knows James Forrest. I know there was something made of something that Brendan Rodgers said in an interview recently, or a press conference, where he said James Forrest, who's currently still a player here, or something like that. He said something. I'm sure everyone's just looking into it sort of forensically as to what he meant by that, as people, myself included, tend to do. But I don't think there's any doubt that a fit James Forrest could still contribute to this Celtic team, as he showed last season with a hat-trick against Hibs.
Yeah,
that wasn't an accident. It's because he's a good football player who's got lots of experience, and you can never have too many of them. I don't think he does divide opinion. I think genuinely, and I was thinking about this the other day when I was buying the tickets, and I was thinking, like, is it because James Forrest isn't on social media? I know you could say the same thing about Callum McGregor, but Callum McGregor is the captain and has adopted that mantle and is maybe sort of stands alone. But I think when it's sad to say that when you're not on social media, you maybe have a bit of a disconnect with the fans, because people like being able to like a picture that a player has put up or comment on a picture. I mean, 20 Minute Tim's had a campaign to get Greg Taylor to switch on his Instagram comments because he had them switched off, because obviously there was a time when a lot of the comments maybe weren't going to be complimentary, but now you look at Greg Taylor's comments and it's love you and you're the best and all this sort of stuff. So I think people like to have that connection, and James Forrest, as he's completely within his rights to do, doesn't have any social media. He's not on Twitter. He's not on Instagram. And I actually respect that. At the same time, it wouldn't be ever something that I would criticise someone for, because some of the things that players must have to put up with after a bad performance. I mean, people say things about us in the YouTube comments, and you're like, whoa, where's that come from? I'm just a Celtic fan talking about supporting Celtic, and it can actually affect you, and to the point that you're like, do I want to do this? I'm pretty sure they're not questioned about playing football, but maybe like the whole social media aspect is a different.
No, definitely. Well, I did hear at the time. Remember, Christie got sent off at Livingston.
Yeah.
I remember he switched off. So it does affect people, JP, and it does. No matter what you think, the negative comment stays with you. You know, because we do get a lot of people very, very supportive, but for some reason that niggly negative one just rattles about your head, and you either somehow manage to just ignore it, or you respond to it. And responding to it's often not a good idea either, because it just feeds the kind of narrative, or it impacts on that person getting a bit of attention. He'll come back to you, he or she. Aye, so absolutely, Jamesy Forrest. It's an interesting point you make, because back in the day when Celtic players were maybe training at Barrowfield, were maybe spending a wee bit more time around about the park and on London Road, going to the up to the training park, there was more of a connect and more of a connection rather, and that's understandable, right? So fans were seeing the players a lot more. Then we move up to Lennoxtown, and it kind of took us a wee bit off the beaten track, and they were stopped a long time ago from going and playing five-a-side tournaments at Butlins with fans. So social media, in that respect, I can see why players would use it. But I've also said on the flip side, and it was around about the whole Lee Griffiths issue a couple of years back, I wouldn't want my players on social media for that reason. So it's a very, very fine balance. So Jamesy's obviously decided not to be on social media, as is his right. And I think there's three reasons for me that he should play a part. The first one, and it's the most important one, is that he has contributed. Now, he's not contributed to the same level as Callum McGregor, playing 50, 60 games a season recently, JP. That has tapered off. But last season, he contributed positively. Season before that, I always remember two moments. The two moments I remember from Angie's first season around James Forrest was the semi-final against St Johnstone and the European game. Remember that touch on the right wing where he's laid it off first time. Now, who was it against? Someone in the comments will tell me. It was a very important goal that came from his part in the movement.
Jota?
Yeah, it was a Jota goal. Yeah. And Forrest played a massive part in the lead up to it. And the thing with that is he is contributing, not every single week. So that's one reason to keep him. He is contributing. Many other Celtic players in that squad are not. The second reason is homegrown player, homegrown hero. Yep, we know we need to have our quota. And for me, the third one is his influence. Now, I shared a Roy Keane thing recently where he's talking about good around the dressing room or good around the training pitch. He said, what does that mean? And he rips it to pieces. And I get that, because I said the same about Scott Bain. But James Forrest is a hugely positive influence, I'm pretty sure, with all that experience, JP. And with the changing faces at Celtic Park, players coming and going, 18 months, 2 years, etc. I think you need that constant, and you do need that backbone, and he's part of that. So that's the three reasons I would keep him. How many games he plays, I'm not sure. But at this stage of his career, and the fact that we've just moved on another right winger, or someone who can certainly play on the right-hand side, yeah, I think he'd be a very, very handy, player to have in the squad. I want to talk to you about Kyogo, because Kyogo is staying at the club. I look back to the time that Rodgers had first time round, the kind of strikers that he had, and who he favoured. So who did we have? We had Lee Griffiths, Moussa Dembele, Odsonne Edouard. Was there any others? That was about it.
Thinking of like his early time, but I don't think anybody really got a look in. Obviously, was it Rodgers that played Mikey Johnson up front against Rangers?
He did. He also played Lewis Morgan up top.
Lewis Morgan, yeah.
First goal scored ever under Rodgers was Nadir Chiefche in a friendly.
Oh God! No, less said about him the better.
Exactly.
Look, Kyogo staying was a really, really pleasant surprise. Well managed. Good news from the club. Let's get the bad news out of the way. Jota leaving, and then let's have good news. I mean, it's well managed, well prepared, and to have that ready to just be like everybody's kind of a bit down, but also comfortable with the fact that we've got really good money for him, and then suddenly you're like, oh, what, Kyogo signed a 4-year deal when you're probably starting to think, are we susceptible to losing Kyogo to Saudi Arabia, because he fits the bill either way in terms of his age.
Yeah.
They obviously they're going for developing players and folk like Jota, and they're also going for players over 30 like Benzema and Kante. So like Kyogo was a legitimate target, I would have thought, and you wouldn't have blamed them for going for him as well, given his numbers. But it's amazing we've got him on a new deal. It's really, really top business, because how do you replace the money you need to spend to replace his goals? You need to get very, very lucky in the transfer market to go out and get someone as proven as him, because he is genuinely heading towards 100 goals, isn't he? I mean, I don't know what's his total tally now. He must be on
54.
54. I mean, 100 goals is an absolute realistic target, and to do it in potentially do it in maybe the shortest period of time as a player.
That would be an interesting stat, that because I know Lee Griffiths got to 100 pretty quickly. That was obviously due to that incredible season that he had under Ronnie Deila. And in actual fact, I've said this before, but Kyogo is one of only 3 players who have scored 34 or more goals in a season in the last 20 years. And it's him, Griffiths, for that 40-goal season he had. And 20 years ago, Henrik Larsson scored 41. So he's in no bad company, I would say. And yeah, you're right. We lose Ange, we bring in Brendan. We lose Jota, we sign a deal with Kyogo. Hopefully the next party that is not another bit of bad news. Hopefully we can get a couple of bits of good news on the back of that. But as I was saying, when I was looking at the strikers, he did favour Dembele and Edouard, eventually at Celtic. And you can understand why. If I was to look at the 3 strikers Rodgers had and utilised at Celtic before, I can't even put Kyogo in the same bracket as any of the 3 of them. I think he's a standalone. I think he's quite unique. He brings something different to the game that the other 3 didn't. And by the way, there was elements of all 3 of those players that I really, really liked. I thought out of the 3, Dembele for me was the best striker. I thought he brought so much to the Celtic side. What I loved about Dembele was not often credited for it. His defensive work was outstanding. The amount of headers he won in his own box was incredible. You didn't see Edouard doing that, right? So Kyogo for me,
very early in his own half.
no. Kyogo for me is a completely different kettle of fish. But on that point, and I made this point yesterday, I also think will be pretty well suited to Rodgers when you look at the makeup of some of the strikers he's used before. Do you think Rodgers will fancy
I think he's. I mean, obviously, I don't know this for sure, but I think he's genuinely enthused by the level of player that's there. Like he doesn't really. I mean, if we do manage to hold on to the majority of that team and squad going into September 1st, and then obviously we'll be bolstering it as well with additional signings, I've no doubt. But I think he's genuinely like, wow, this is a pretty good side that I can mould here and put my stamp on, and potentially get more out of players, like you said, potentially get more out of. I mean, O's had a very, very short period of time at Celtic so far to really stake a claim. I don't think you could really. I don't really want to judge him or Kobayashi either. I mean, the people were quick to sort of throw him in the scrap heap. Bernabei could be somebody as well that he develops. But I think when you're comparing Kyogo to the strikers that were there before, he is a kind of anomaly, like a standalone. There's not anybody been like him before, really. I mean, he just delivers when you need a goal. He might only get 2 or 3 chances. He'll take one of them, and it'll be important. If it's a cup final, he'll get 2 of them. It's in the same way. It's like Maeda. People will say Maeda's not the best player, but Maeda gives you something that I've never seen a Celtic player give us before. And it's for that reason that I would not want him going anywhere near the exit door, because I just think what a powerful weapon to have in your arsenal in a variety of different type of games. You know, whether it's Champions League, whether you're looking to defend a lead in the Champions League or defend a point in the Champions League, to have him to come on and harass players and watch him do those almost like bleep tests in the 89th minute where people are maybe on their feet and he's still showing up at that point in time, like chasing back and covering left or right back positions. I saw that with my own eyes. You can see the impact that guy has. So there's a load of things that make you excited about what can happen going forward with Brendan Rodgers back at Celtic. The pictures of him in the training gear the other day at Lennoxtown, there's that picture that's been shared quite a lot on Twitter of him sort of maniacally smiling. He's just sort of like looking up as if he's like come up with a mad idea, and it does look a bit unhinged, but I'm here for it. I'm here for unhinged and hopefully making these players better, because what a frightening prospect that is if he could make this team and these players better than what they've been.
It really is something to look forward to. And we spoke yesterday about some of the guys that we thought he would do well with. Abada's name was mentioned if he stays, of course, O'Reilly. And I even threw Joe Hart into the mix, but that's a completely different discussion. Danny McKinley comes in on the YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to comment, then just subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up on the video as well. And we will be running for the full hour. We've only got 19 minutes left. We've not mentioned music yet, but I do have a music question for you, so I'm going to ask it as well. So what we've got here is Danny McKinley. Suppose players will respond differently to the management style. Some will enjoy the arm around the shoulder from Rodgers. Some won't need it. Now, this may or may not be connected, Danny, to the comments made by Matt O'Reilly yesterday. A lot of people focused on the comments and polarised Rodgers' approach to Angie's approach and whether or not we read into it. You said it. We go through it intrinsically and forensically anyway, because that's what we do as Celtic fans, and it's a pre-season. So anything that's said, we will be looking at it very, very closely. And Matt O'Reilly did speak about the fact that, at lunch he'll come over and sit next to you. We've heard previously the approach of Ange was probably the opposite of that, JP. I can't remember which ex-player it was, but it might have been an Australian international who spoke about the fact that he ended up sitting next to Ange on a flight and Ange didn't utter two words to him throughout the entire journey. It's a different approach. Now, I'm not going to start saying that Ange's approach didn't work. Obviously it did. But Rodgers brings something completely different. It's going to be refreshing to some. Others, their level of performance or their approach won't change. Do we read too much into these things?
I mean, probably. I mean, we sit and talk about Celtic for an hour on a Thursday, so we definitely are invested, shall we say, in what goes on. But I think, just thinking about Brendan Rodgers coming back, I think he is in a position whereby if he made mistakes, and I don't mean in the transfer market, obviously, because we kind of know that there was things being done above his head, clearly. Yeah. There's no way that that's not the truth. But I think maybe like the mistakes that he's maybe made in terms of how he's applied himself to be the manager at Celtic the first time round, there's maybe things that he can sort of subtly correct this time that maybe that would only be maybe noticed by Callum McGregor, James Forrest, Anthony Ralston, Scott Bain, that they'll maybe be like, oh, he wouldn't have done that the last time or something like that, because he'll have learned in 4 years away from Celtic. He'll have learned, and he's said that himself, that he's obviously become a better manager in the time that he's been away. So to come back, he'll be able to, I think that in itself would make him a better Celtic manager, because you've got an opportunity to have another go at it, but with the benefit of 4 years additional management down south, and also like reflecting back on what you did the first time in the first 3 years, because there probably was things that we may never find out about that he did, that he would say he did wrong in the first time, and whereby he's got an opportunity now to do it better, and or not better, but just to do things differently, which as a result could be better.
He seems to be relishing that challenge. It must be great to go over a period in your life or your working career and think, I'm going to put everything right, or I'm going to, as you say, make it better this time round. The tagline, JP, is of course the subject of tickets at Ibrox. And I think that I'm going to bring up some of the comments that are coming through. It's the wording, almost as if, Rangers are, holding out an olive branch to Celtic, as if it's been caused by Celtic. We all know the truth. We know who started this situation. And Stevie Boy comes in to say, no matter how much they twist the narrative, that's exactly what we're talking about, Stevie, that they're twisting the narrative. Even with their friends in the mainstream media, they ruined a once great fixture. Only they can sort it by giving us our full allocation again. And John Sweeney also comes in. They are trying to make Celtic look bad with offering similar amount of tickets, knowing we will refuse due to safety concerns. Well, if we refused it before, John, due to the safety concerns, what's changed? They're not going to be able to give us any more, assurance that our fans, our players, our staff are going to be any safer with the same amount of tickets. So I totally agree with that. And Stevie Boy comes back in. They caused it. Only they can sort it. I've asked you this before, and I'm guessing that your view on it hasn't changed, JP. But unless we get that full stand, we're never going to be in a position to accept 700 tickets.
I think the writing's on the wall now with regards to that, isn't it? I mean, I saw some chat about it this morning. Obviously, I saw the article, and basically they've sold their, I think, what have they sold? 45? Did they say they've sold 45,000 season tickets? So that obviously means that they can't give us the full stand. I mean, how much was the full stand? The amount in that?
It was not as much as 7.5, but it was there. It was between 7 and 7.5 that we used to get in the Broomloan. And this is the thing, right? Because on the one side, Celtic were winning games at a canter. There was scarves being tied to goalposts, all that kind of stuff, right? We get all that side of it. But I totally agree with that other side of it, JP. It came down to money. Obviously, they didn't like seeing Celtic partying. They hated it. You know what I mean? You can imagine them up in the boxes in the corporate lounges looking down, Celtic fans celebrating like another resounding victory after, one of our players had wiped his nose on a corner flag, or Mika Lustig had been running about, with the shouted Turin over his face, or whatever he was doing that day. And we were celebrating, and it was a party. Yeah, that's one take on it. The other take, and I think it's more realistic when you look at their history, is the fact that they just saw those seats as being more valuable to them as season ticket seats, rather than giving us 77,500 in the Broomloan. And now that they've gone so far down that line, they're never going to refuse a season ticket over 2 games against us, are they?
No, and obviously you're constantly reading chat about them looking to redevelop Ibrox and build on top of stands or fill in the. I mean, I think that was mentioned at one of their recent meetings or whatever they do over there. They were talking about filling in the corner and taking away the screens to give them an extra couple of thousand seats or whatever it was going to do. So they're obviously looking to exploit every single opportunity to make money, because let's face it, they need it. They need to bridge the gap financially to us, because as we've spoken about before, we start before a ball is kicked with a financial advantage over them, because we've got 10,000 more seats in our stadium, which, okay, it doesn't provide us with hundreds of millions, but it provides us with 5-6 million immediately as a head starter for 10. So that now, the fact that they've exploited that revenue and they're guaranteed it almost, because let's face it, no surrender and all that, they'll buy their season tickets in droves. So they've got that guaranteed income now. It would almost be insane of them to give it up. I want them to, because I want to be able to go back to Ibrox and see Celtic play there. And as it stands, there's absolutely no way that I'll get there. And it's been 5 years now since the Odsonne Edouard game, and that's the last time I was in that ground. And as I've said before, the people that get those 700 tickets, if we were to get them again, obviously they're the people that go. If Celtic were playing in the Moon, they'll be there, so they are quite within the rights to get those tickets. But if it was me, I would be saying, as you just said, it's if you've turned them down once, you're going to turn them down again. So it's just going to end up being a home fixture full of home fans for both clubs 4 times this season.
Yeah.
And then we get them in the cup. Obviously, there's the split at Hampden, or the allocation that you have to give if you play each other in an earlier round at home. So they would need to give us the European allocation, or whatever it is they give European teams at 2.5 or something like that. Where they kind of, it's sort of half bit of the Broomloan and then that corner bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, you saw it when they were on their European run. They were given those allocations to the likes of Leipzig or whoever. So I would very much doubt that we will accept those 700 tickets, and therefore the standoff continues.
It does. Because I remember at the time, again, it's all about narratives, and you've got to kind of read between the lines. But the reason Celtic approached them, this is it, right? So right now, the narrative is trying to swing it in Rangers' kind of direction. Celtic approached them last season, and it was on the back of the response. They could not get assurances in terms of the safety of the fans. It was the safety of the fans, and the experience of going to the game was kind of nullified due to the fact of where we were and the fact that there was things getting chucked at the Celtic support for 90 minutes and longer. That Celtic asked to go back to the normal figure. That was knocked back. Celtic responded, well, you're getting no tickets for Celtic Park. That's what happened, and that's the facts. But it's interesting how these things are kind of skewed in time.
The other thing to think about there is you don't want it to become a situation whereby there's tit for tat incidents going on, whereby if something was to happen to a Celtic fan at Ibrox and then 700 Rangers fans were to come to Celtic Park, you're not going to try and tell me that there's people within our support that, whether drinking them, will try and gain revenge, because not every one of our fans are, whiter than white. There's potential for bother, and if something bad happens to one of our fans at their ground, there's every chance that there will be a retaliation, and you don't want that to come in. You don't want that to become the thing whereby it's like everything's building up towards what might happen, and everything's on a knife edge because of this decision, and people's lives are in danger. Maybe not lives, but well-being and welfare.
Yeah, I mean, a glass bottle. If that hits you in the eye, we've seen people with their heads split open. So you're spot on, but the point you make there, it was interesting because obviously we were with Gordon Strachan last week, JP. It's a gig you would have loved. And I made the point, I wrote a blog about it on Acsom.net last night about the fact that there's many players as well, but I was looking at the managers who have come to Celtic and basically, given us the whole spiel. Born into Celtic and all this kind of stuff, and going back to the roots and all that, and giving us the speech and all the rest of it. And that's all fair and well, but I think over the last, the Rodgers departure and Angie's departure, we're getting a wee bit harder to these things. And my point was that Gordon Strachan never ever did that when he took over the job from Martin. What a job he did, by the way. But he never ever did that. He never tried to curry favour or any of that. And that was despite the fact, I used 3 examples, that when he was an Aberdeen player, he wasn't liked by sections of the Celtic support. What a player he was. I had to remind him that he was 4th in the Ballon d'Or in 1980. He obviously got nothing for being 4th because he was like, somebody told me that. As if it was just like, no bother, 4th best player in Europe. So on 2 occasions, one at Celtic Park, one at Pittodrie, 1980 and 1981, a Celtic fan ran onto the park and attacked Gordon Strachan. Different fans, by the way. Didn't follow him up to Aberdeen and do it again the following year. And then, of course, there was the final game he ever played for Aberdeen, where Mark McGee was tackled by Roy Aitken 6 minutes before half-time, JP, right? It was never a sending off, but Bob Valentine, Strachan was right in his face, almost demanding that Aitken gets sent off. Mark McGee's writhing in agony. He's play acting on the park. Roy Aitken gets his marching orders. But Strachan played a part in that. So Celtic fans weren't too keen on him, let's just say. And he never tried all that carry on. I've always admired Celtic. He never done any of that. But during the 4 years he was at Celtic, and his parting speech, which I quoted on the blog, where he speaks about he never came here as a Celtic fan. He never knew the words to the fields of Athenry, but he is a Celtic fan now. And we totally got that on Friday night. He's so passionate about this football club. It's unbelievable.
Really?
So much respect for the fans. Unbelievable, JP. Seriously. I mean, the impact that Celtic have had on him is incredible. And I know that you would love this, but there's a wee mezzanine area, and anybody who do the VIP option can go up, meet the guest, get the photograph taken, get a free gift, etc. And we had the playlist on, and we decided the entire playlist would be James, because we know Gordon Strachan's a big fan. And he decided to FaceTime Tim Booth to tell Tim who he was with, what he was doing, and the fact that James were the soundtrack for the night. And there's Tim on Strachan's phone. It was a great night. But I wanted to make that point because I think we're getting harder and harder to the words and the badge kissers and all that kind of stuff. And then Gordon Strachan comes along. He didn't have any good history with Celtic, I would say. He certainly wasn't affiliated to the club. He was a Hibs fan. He played with Dundee. He played with Aberdeen. But he certainly proved himself, and that was very, very important. And I think looking back, though, JP, he's more appreciated now than he maybe was at the time.
I appreciated him at the time, and I don't know if I said this before, but I went up to him at Airth Castle. I was there for my mate's wedding, and there was a morning after the wedding, and he was leaving, and I actually saw him.
Who was your mate?
It was Craig Finlay, ex of Hearts, Berwick Rangers, and Peterhead. A storied footballing career in the lower leagues. He never really made it at Hearts, but then he did play all right for Berwick. He scored in the Scottish Cup and that against St Mirren. And Craig Finlay from Bathgate. If anybody knows of him, he now lives out in America with his wife and kids. He was staying somewhere near a place called Kalamazoo in Michigan.
Right.
Which I always found hilarious that he was staying in Kalamazoo. But I was at his wedding, and I saw Strachan come out because all the players had stayed there as well. And I went up to him. It was the week after he'd been given stick for saying something about a Celtic fan with a bulldog or something like that. You know, there was that comment where he was like kind of stereotyped a Celtic fan that was giving him that would give him grief. Mm-hmm. And I think he'd had bother in the street as well. I'm sure he'd said something. Somebody had come up to him in the street. So I just went up to him, shook his hand, and went, "Mr. Strachan, thanks very much for everything you've done for the club so far. It's been brilliant." He was like, "Thank you, son, thank you." And then I watched him drop Magic Zarafsky. He took him round the corner into this little area, and I'm pretty sure, judging by the way that Magic Zarafsky looked as he walked out away from that, was that he'd just been told he wasn't playing. And then when I heard in the radio in the car the team being announced for the game against Falkirk, because that's where they were playing, it was like, no Magic Zarafsky in the Celtic side today.
You've seen it live. You've seen it developing.
I saw the guy with his face tripping him that he wasn't playing, and Strachan just walked away. I saw like Nakamura was there with his translator, and Stephen McManus, and Vinegar of Hesselink, Gravison. It was all Kenny Miller, Gary Caldwell, all those guys are all going onto the bus in their Celtic gear.
The other great stuff, because he's funny. He's so funny, right? Without trying to be, JP. Yeah. He's not telling jokes. You know what I mean? He's reacting to the stories and whatever's coming up, and he's so funny, as he is a lot of the time on the telly as well. But he told a great story. I was a big fan of Mark McGee. The Mark McGee now, the guy that's become the meme, the Motherwell fan and all that kind of stuff, isn't the Mark McGee I remember. I remember Mark McGee as a Celtic player during that centenary season. I also remember the following season, he scored a hat-trick against St Mirren in the 7-1 game. It was pelting it down with rain, and one of the goals he scored was a back heel.
Totally.
You remember that? Brilliant.
Me and my mate Michael still, like, every time we see a back heel in a game, we'll be like, Mark McGee.
And that celebration, just the one finger up in there. Well, Strachan and McGee were best mates during their time at Aberdeen. And I found this hilarious because he says that part of the problem with their relationship with Alex Ferguson was that they left Aberdeen. He said that was the issue. Ferguson didn't think they should have left and all this kind of stuff. But at that time, and this is also quite interesting, at that time, having won a couple of leagues, couple of Scottish Cups, 2 European trophies, the Ballon d'Or, 4th position and all that, Scotland's Player of the Year, Strachan was getting paid £250 a week. So when the offer comes in from elsewhere, it's a wee bit like Jota, not to the same degree, but it's a no-brainer for the player. But what happened was, and I don't know if this was due to agents in Scottish football at the time, but Gordon Strachan was offered a deal at Cologne, right? So him and his wife, and Mark McGee and his wife were really tight, JP, and meeting up for dinner and all that kind of stuff during the week. And, you know, the two couples are like, oh, it'd be great if Mark could get a deal and go to Germany. So lo and behold, I don't know if it was by design, but Mark McGee gets the opportunity to go to Hamburg, right? So Strachan actually signed a deal. He signed a contract with Cologne, and Mark McGee signed the deal with Hamburg. And then Man United showed an interest in Strachan, so he decided, I'm not going to Germany. So Manchester United agreed to pay some fee for Cologne to tear up the deal, right? So I think it added about 100 grand onto the deal or something like that. But Man U were prepared to do that. And McGee and his wife ended up having to move to Germany. And they were only going to go there because they were all going together, and we Strachan pulled out the deal. Unbelievable story. And I felt a wee bit sorry for Mark McGee, I've got to say. But it does lead us on to what is over your shoulder is a book called The Celtic Jersey. And I'm a big fan of Celtic jerseys, as are you, JP. And I mentioned the other day on Monday that the first time I ever met you in person, you were wearing that, what is now a cult iconic Celtic away jersey with the zigzags on it. And Kevin Graham was wearing it on Monday's show. We have got differing opinions about this new Celtic home jersey, haven't we? What I'm going to say is, yeah, I know time moves on, right? Time moves on. Liverpool have revealed an away shirt, and it's like the quarter shirt, green, white. So it's obviously a nod back to that brilliant Adidas jersey they had back in the day with Stan Collymore and McManaman and Redknapp. Brilliant, beautiful jersey. But it's in the modern way where there never seems to be any clear lines. Every line has to be blurred or manipulated or whatever, modified. And that's what's happened with the hoops. But you quite like it.
I don't really see the hoo-ha over it. To me, it just I think as my friend Chris pointed out, if it hadn't had the kind of blurred, if it was just straight up like hoops, if it didn't have that kind of like effect, the sort of jagged effect on the hoops, then they probably would have got away with it a bit more. And also the initial picture with Callum McGregor where he's got it out over these shorts, and it's just like, it looks mental. And also the long sleeved, would never get it long sleeved. The black stripes down on a long sleeve hoop top doesn't look right. That looks like it's been drawn on or something, or it's been like someone's photoshopped it. But I think short sleeve, sponsorless, I'm into it. I can't say why that I'm not against it. I suppose logic would dictate that I should be against it, but I think it's fine. I don't think it's the best Celtic top I've ever seen. I think I actually really liked last season's. I thought last season's with the silver was pretty cool. But I'm prepared to. I got the black away top, the one that was released. Yes. I really like that. I think that's smart.
Can you get that without the sponsor, JP?
Yes, you can.
Nice.
I got it.
Nice.
I got it sponsorless. I went online and got it because I know how popular they are. I mean, I think it was after a couple of months of the last season's black and green redo of the 90s away strip. You know that one, the
biggest seller. Yeah.
Well, to try and get that sponsorless after maybe a month or two of its release was impossible, and then they didn't make any more. And I saw loads of people kind of moaning online about the fact that they just didn't make them without like sponsorless. They made a batch of them sponsorless, and then they didn't make them again. So I was quick off the mark to get that black one without the sponsor. I don't think I'll have much trouble getting the home one without a sponsor, judging by the reaction to it. But be interesting to see the figures in Celtic. I don't know if that's ever released, Celtic's individual sales figures for a home shirt, but it would be interesting to see them and how they stand up, because the comments online would have you think that there's absolutely no chance that Celtic are going to make money out of this. It's probably going to run at a loss. But I think my friend James is an Aberdeen fan. The Aberdeen away strip, I can't remember which one. It might have been the blue one. I think when that was released, the comments were all predominantly negative, and then it turned out to be the best seller. It was like the best selling away top.
this is the thing. Like I'm thinking of a graph, like a sales graph, and it's probably going to look similar to that away top you were wearing at the Joe booth that day, where it just goes like that and plummets. But they will have some kind of stat where they will be able to say, these kind of bloodlines, these are working right now in this territory and this territory, and it'll be guys that aren't even Celtic fans that are buying it. You know what I mean? They're not going to just be looking at the Celtic fan base. They'll be looking to try and tap into other markets, JP, and they'll justify it some way by saying that I don't like it. JP does, but I want you to leave in the comments, should Celtic fans be part of some kind of consultation process where there's a group of fans up at Celtic Park? It could even be an interactive thing remotely, JP, where we have a say. Celtic fans have a say, and in the new design, they might even be presented with half a dozen. You do a vote, etc. Should Celtic fans be involved in that? Leave your thoughts in the comments section, please. And also, if you were Gordon Strachan and you were looking at the Celtic squad right now, which player would you send to Hamburg never to come back? Because there's a few still hanging about, JP, and you're hoping that Brendan Rodgers is able to get them out the building. We know that Barkas is away. I read a story today that, Sorrow, there's interest in Sorrow. Some players are still hanging around. We've still got James McCarthy and Urugide and Ayeti. So there are some players that hopefully we can get out the building as well. Because the way I always look at this, even if they're making 10 grand a week, 15 grand a week, accumulatively, that's a player. That's a signing. That's somebody who can contribute to the side.
Totally. There's definitely a lot of players that they're definitely not going to contribute. I don't think. I just can't see a Lazarus-like recovery for any of these guys. I mean, James McCarthy could. I mean, I saw him having a laugh. Again, this is like going down to like studying things forensically, but I saw him having a laugh with Rodgers in one of the training videos, and you think to yourself, "Oh, does that mean that there's a chance for McCarthy for redemption?" Who knows? Who knows? It's going to be interesting to watch this season unfold in terms of who's going to make the grade and who Rodgers is going to like out of the players that are there, and who's going to become a guy, who are going to be the names that are like, well, we know that Rodgers will start him in every game, or we know that they're kind of nailed on for a shirt every week, because it will soon become apparent. When you look at the first 11 that he puts out against Ross County on the 5th of August, that will dictate probably how it's going to go for the shape of the squad. And then we've got another. Is the window the same this season? Is it like 31st of August? Will that be when it?
We spoke about that yesterday. I assume it is, unless someone else can tell us otherwise in the comments. I'm assuming it's the 31st of August, JP.
Yeah. Well, we've still got plenty of time to get players in and get players out, and we don't have the banana skins of our Champions League qualifiers to negotiate. We know we're there. It's such a weird thing. I'll never ever be used to this feeling of knowing that we're in the Champions League. Like I've got a physical diary, and I always like writing in the dates of what's coming up, just so that I can manoeuvre my life around games and whatnot. And writing in the Champions League games is usually a question mark, whereas it was like, because obviously you can look up the dates of when they'll be. So like the Tuesday, Wednesday in September, October, November, December. And I'm putting them into the diary, and they're there. They're not penciled. There's
confirmed.
No it's confirmed. It's either we're either going to be playing in the Champions League on that day or that day, and I'm really excited about who we can get.
No, me as well. By the way, I know that we are. I wouldn't call us Celtic Daz quite yet. Some people might call me that. JP, we're a wee bit older, and people might say, "You guys need to get a grip. You're talking about Celtic." Yes, we are. That's exactly what we're doing. Michael Ross, hate Adidas kits. Don't want them doing our kits. I just want them to return to something a wee bit more classic. They've had some unbelievable templates, and the one that I keep going back to is Newcastle, kind of mid-90s, Kevin Keegan era. And they had the purple and the blue hoops with the white Adidas stripes. It was beautiful. Grandad collar. I'd be all over that. About green and white.
You're going to get this Origins kit. That's almost been
right enough. Yeah.
In October, I think it is. I'm led to believe it's going to be very expensive. But if you don't like the current kit that's come out, then you know that there's that kit in the works. And that is an amazing kit.
That's stunning. It's stunning.
It's proper.
But listen, I'm now trying to think what they're doing is they're normalising that now. This is going to be the second time we've had a kit that the club's never going to wear, right? Last season it was the fourth kit, right? And it was like a St. Patrick's Day kit, remember? And the green and white and gold and all that. So they're now normalising that. We're going to release a jersey every single year for the traditionalists. So last year we touched on the Irish heritage of the club. This year it's a green and white.
They need to make a charity aspect for it, and I said that after that St. Patrick's Day kit that was kind of shoehorned into the end of last season. That's why I was against the concept of that kit and the timing and everything else. At least this kit's coming out only after 2 months of the season. So in terms of your wear of it, you're going to get you'll be able to wear it if that's how you think about these things. You'll be able to wear it for mostly the full season. But I think it would be such a good move by the club to inject. I'm not saying 100% of the profits. I wouldn't expect Adidas or Celtic to be that gallus with the cash that they'll get in, because they will get a lot of money in for this kit. And I know it's limited as well, which is the other reason that they should make it a charitable thing, because it's like, right, well, we know this is going to sell out, give 30-40% to charity and pick out either the foundation or something like that. And I just think that would be a really good gesture from the club, and it would make the idea of, even though I think the kit's smart as anything, it would make the idea of an added kit that we're not going to wear, it'd make it a little bit more palatable.
I agree with that. Totally. But they're making it so normal now, JP, that they'll release a kit every season for the traditionalists amongst us that will tap into our kind of like, the history and everything else. And then they'll release some kind of jazzy effort that's based on market research that, is going to sell big in America, even though the people buying it might not actually like Celtic, they just like the jersey. So I can see all that coming. Joseph points out that Dortmund done it. I think you're talking about consulting the fans, getting the fans involved. I think it's a great idea. Before you go, JP, we've not really spoken about anything outside of football and Celtic. We do like to touch on other things, other matters. I seen on Twitter this morning, Irvin Welsh was saying that it's been 30 years since the release of the Trainspotting book, which I've got to say was a game changer for me when it came to getting into books and reading and literature. I remember reading this. It was hanging about my house for ages. My big sister's book, actually. And it was the edition with the black cover with the silver skulls. And I remember, I think it was a quote from Rebel Ink saying, this book deserves to sell more copies than the Bible. I thought, what is this thing? And I started reading it. And I remember the first 10, 20 pages, I had to reread them to get into the kind of groove of the way that Irvin Welsh wrote and writes. Actually, his writing style has changed over the years when you go back to it. But what an impact that book had. There's been so much parody around it, the poster and Choose Life and all this kind of stuff, Choose an Unbroken History, for example. You could change it to just about anything, right? I love the book. I love the movie. Did you go to the cinema to see it? What's your kind of memories? Did it have the same impact on you, JP?
No, I was just a bit too young to get into the cinema to see it, I think. I mean, so if it was 30 years ago, that was what? No way. Is it 30 years ago was the book? The film...
96, I think the book, the film came out in 96.
Maybe I could have got into it. I probably could have got into the cinema to see it. I don't think I did. I remember buying an ex-rental copy of it as soon as you could. Remember in video shops you used to get ex-rental copies, and they were in the giant box.
Yeah.
I bought an ex-rental copy of it as soon as it became available to buy, as in before it was officially released on video. I got it ex-rental in Videoland in Bathgate or something like that. And so I had it from the moment I could get it, and I was completely obsessed with it. I just thought I'd never seen a film that I'd connected to that was Scottish, that had mostly Scottish actors in it, and was set in Edinburgh. So I knew, like, the scene at the start when they're running along past, like they were in John Menzies. I'd been in that John Menzies, like when they're running along the street and everything. You're like, wow, this is like I was in Edinburgh all the time as a wee guy, more so than Glasgow, just because there was a train service from Bathgate to Edinburgh, and it was the only place you could get to from Bathgate was Edinburgh. You couldn't get a train to Glasgow. You can now, obviously, but back then it was just Livingston, Uphull, and Edinburgh was your possible destinations on a train out of Bathgate. So I loved it. Then loved the soundtrack as well. And Oasis turned down the soundtrack because Noel thought the film was actually about Trainspotting. So, but the soundtrack's still great without them. You've got like Blurs on it and Primal Scream and Iggy Pop. It's the songs in that film are totally iconic, and again also got me into other music. Like that led me down in the same way that a few years later Radiohead did. That soundtrack led me down different paths in terms of getting into other bands at that time.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, listen, it is up there. The soundtrack was brilliant of its time. I did go to watch it at the Pictures at the cinema after the Fife Cup final where we beat Queen Anne 6-1, and we did St Columba's beat Queen Anne 6-1. It was such a victory. And then we went to the Robin Cinema, which is no longer there in Dunfermline, and we watched Trainspotting. Not my favourite Irving Welsh book, as it happens. What's your favourite Irving Welsh book, JP?
I do love The Acid House. I love The Acid House, again, because I love the film. The film's
I love
men.
The very own Simon Weir, isn't it? The Grant and Star Cause.
Grant and Star Cause is up there with my favourite things ever. It's just so. If you haven't seen The Acid House, make a point of allowing it into your life. The fireplace scene is all I'm going to say.
Bob Coyle.
So dark.
My favourite Irving Welsh book is The Marabou Stork Nightmares. If you agree or disagree with JP on that or anything else we've spoken about, let us know in the comments. Thanks everybody for getting involved. 1100 strong throughout that show. Absolutely brilliant. It's great to get back on a Thursday with JP Mason. I'll always enjoy it. If you want to comment, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. And if you want to come along and recreate your Butlins photos with Roy Aitken at the end of this month at Barra's Art and Design, there are some tickets available. The link is under the video. I look forward to seeing you there. All that's left for me to say, JP Mason, thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.